Welcome to the Jersey Justice Podcast, featuring your hosts, attorneys Gerald Clark and Mark Morris.
So, Victoria, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been really excited about this podcast for a few days thinking about it. So, tell us. So, basically, the reason I asked you to come on is because you started a school. When these days when someone says they started a school, it's like, oh, was it a preschool or is this some like profit thing? And when people talk about when I hear people talk about you or your husband in connection with the school that you guys started and everything, you can do a lot of cool things in life, but how many people can say that they started a school, So that's kind of what I wanted to, that's kind of what I thought was interesting. Can you tell us about the school that you guys started and like what it's all about and what that thing is?
Sure. First, I have to acknowledge my co-founders, which is my husband especially, and Mairead and Sean Clifford, who Mairead and I met years and years ago when our children, our oldest, were infants. But the idea of starting an all-girls school is not a new one. There were all-girls schools around forever. My mother went to one. I went to one. There was a school called Our Lady Star of the Sea in Long Branch. That was an all-girls school that closed in the late 60s. And so over the years, there were a lot of people who tried to start an all-girls school because CBA, you went there, I know that, I think started in 59.
Christian Brothers Academy in Lincroft.
Christian Brothers Academy started in 1959.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and I think as the popularity and the success of CBA grew, I think there were a lot of parents who were unhappy or feeling as if their girls were left behind. So I know in the 70s, there was a group of parents who wanted to start an all-girls school. They approached the bishop at the time, which was Bishop R. He told them to cease and desist, which they did.
Wait, hold on. When you say the bishop, what are you talking about? You mean Trenton?
Yes. So in order to be, and so I'm going to take a circuitous route here.
Yeah.
When the people in the 70s wanted to start an all-girls school, they wanted to start an all-girls Catholic school.
Right.
And you cannot be a Catholic school unless you are given the blessing, not even the blessing, you need to be deemed a Catholic school by the Catholic Church in the diocese you operate. So these were Catholic school parents.
So diocese, can you just explain that real quick for people?
Sure.
I mean, I grew up Catholic, still am Catholic last time I checked. But how's that organized? How's the Catholic Church organized in that way?
Well, listen, I don't know exactly how the Catholic Church is organized, but basically parishes fall underneath the diocese. Okay. So you'll often hear the Diocese of Trenton, the Diocese of New York, and whatever area that there are parishes, they will fall under a diocese. So
there's a bishop in charge of each diocese.
There's a bishop in charge of each diocese. And often there's a thing that people don't understand about schools, especially Catholic schools, is that there are diocesan schools, which are supported by the church and by the diocese with money. And then there are independent Catholic schools, which get nothing from anybody, not from the state, not from the church.
Got it.
And then there are independent schools not affiliated with the church. So we always wanted to be an independent Catholic school. But in order to call ourselves a Catholic school, we had to get permission from the bishop. So that's a really interesting story in and of itself.
So tell us about the school in the 70s, though. That's where I interrupted you.
That's okay. So what I was saying is it's, this whole idea of an all-girls school is not really a new one. There's some very successful all-girls schools up north. There's Oak Knoll School of the Holy Child. There's around New York City, there's so many. It's so sad when you look at what we have here. There was none.
Are those different dioceses up there? Is Trenton?
They are different dioceses. I'm
a public school Protestant in here, so if I need to leave the room, I get it. But
no, that's okay. I mean, it is a little. I'm from Long Island, so a New Jersey transplant. So when we start talking about like Mercer County and all the other counties, I have no idea what you're even talking about. So I may be as lost as you, but so there's some great all-girls Catholic schools, and they're independent. They are not diocesan for the most part. Sadly, diocesan schools do not tend to be the best at educating their kids for a lot of reasons. I'll let them tell you why, but I think a lot of parents would find that. And we could talk about what my views are on education.
How does the pay scale in terms of the private schools, Catholic schools versus diocesan schools? Do you know much about that?
Well, the pay scales at diocesan Catholic schools are much lower
For the educators and stuff. I mean.
for the educators.
Yeah.
And I think, public schools, they dangle the carrot of the, your pension.
The state pension.
Sure.
You have to stay within that state, so you really can't compete with public schools.
Yeah.
But independent schools, in order to have really great teachers, which is actually really hard to find, you have to really pay them a lot. So that's one of the things. I'm not an educator. I didn't come from an education background, so I learned a lot. So now I know a lot, but it's really learning on the job.
Cool. All right, so keep going.
Okay,
You're telling about- yeah.
I mean, it's really not that big a deal, except that there were some parents in the 70s who wanted to start an all-girls school. They went to the bishop. The bishop said no. They gave up.
And we
Do you
know why.
Yeah, was it just the timing? Was it the
Well,
decade?
they knew they couldn't start an all-girls Catholic school without the bishop saying okay.
But do we know why the
yeah.
bishop said no? Like,
Oh
what was the
yeah,
problem?
oh yeah, I'm sure, because of probably cannibalization of his other schools.
Okay.
So if
In
you
the
had
70s.
even in the 70s, I mean, I don't even know what schools were around. I'm assuming Mater Dei was around back then. There were some other Catholic schools that were around.
Yeah.
And I don't know, laziness. I'm not sure what exactly. I mean, even when you hear the story about starting Trinity Hall, you'll see it's a really, male-focused industry even now. So they probably didn't want to be bothered with a bunch of parents.
Do we know how schools like Christian Brothers Academy in Lincroft, that's not a diocesan school?
No,
but
it's an independent school, but
it's-
they are Catholic.
Okay.
So there is
So like
input.
how they slip by and get the approval?
Well,
Do you think there's a male versus female thing to it?
I absolutely do think there's a male-female thing attached to it. I don't really think that now with Trinity Hall, but I do think, I think you would probably know a little bit more about how CBA started, but it didn't start as a Catholic school. It probably started out as a school, right? And then became Catholic. I don't know if that's the
I think
case.
that's right. And then they brought the Christian Brothers came in later and agreed to run it.
Yeah.
I think.
And I don't know exactly either, but I do believe it was, kind of for the wayward boys to begin with. So I don't know if that's true, but
That's what we said at Wall High School.
yeah, I know. You guys were probably harsh on them.
Well, I always did find that ironic because when you talk about Christian Brothers Academy, I think it's in the tradition of St. John Baptist de La Salle, who I
Yes.
think was a French, certainly he was a religious, I can't say priest, but I think he started the order, the Christian Brothers. And as I understand it, they definitely started out to help wayward boys and low income and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I always find it ironic that if you look at the demographics of who goes to Christian Brothers Academy today or can afford the $20,000 plus annual tuition, I always felt it's ironic that you know what I mean? That,
Yeah.
it's a Christian Brothers school. There's still a lot of Christian Brothers there teaching, and certainly they have scholarships. And I think, and you know about that, I think you have a scholarship that your family has supported at Christian Brothers Academy. The irony of it started out for poor people, and the Christian Brothers that say run the school take a vow of poverty, but then they end up.
do they though?
They
Because-
They definitely take a vow of poverty.
Do they take a? Because I was just speaking to a priest who did not take one. Only certain orders take a vow
Yeah.
of poverty. But I will correct you a little bit because I think that Christian Brothers still has their mission of educating boys. There is a lot of financial aid there, and there is a lot of scholarship money there.
Right.
And I think they really do try to make it affordable
Yeah.
for everyone.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, and I've learned this myself with Trinity Hall, you can only do so much. You cannot tell people how to spend their money. So if someone wants a really big financial aid package but drives a really nice car or has a really nice vacation, it's hard to try to figure out the best way to help that family. So if someone's like, "Oh, I can't afford it, it's $20,000," I'm like, "But weren't you just in Barbados?" I mean, so it's really a choice. Education's a choice.
Yeah.
So I always say you have one chance to educate your child. And I don't know if I'm allowed to digress, but I grew up on Long Island.
There's no rules, there's no format,
rules.
Okay.
and there's no script.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so,
we're not regulated by the FCC, so feel free to curse if you want.
Oh, okay, I might have to.
So I effing grew up in.
Well, if
don't
you
need
want
to
me,
do that.
I will try to tame my Long Island accent. But I did grow up on Long Island, the South Shore of Long Island. My father was a cop in New York City. He was a lieutenant, and he ran a detective squad. But neither he nor my mother went to college. So there were 5 kids. They put us through Catholic school. We were always broke. My parents were always fighting about money. So I remember that a lot from being a child. But I also remember the fact that we were never, ever allowed to say anything other than the fact that we were going to college. And my parents probably had no idea how they were going to pay for it. I don't even think they thought about it, but you are going to college. Most of us were swimmers. We go to swim practice every morning for 2 hours in the summer, no goggles. Couldn't afford goggles, but we had the wine and the cigarettes, but we also had, not us, my parents, but we were going to college. And most of my parents' contemporaries, their kids, some went to college, some didn't. It really wasn't like it is today where everyone goes to college. So
Where did your parents get that value, having not gone to college themselves, but had such a strong value in education? Do you know where that came from?
I think it was really my father, and I think that he had a very actual worldly view because of working in Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, and stuff like that. I think he realized education is the way out.
Right.
And not that he looked at his own kids and family as if we needed to get out of somewhere. We had a loving family. We lived in a very nice house on Long Island, but the idea, we were always like, you cannot become a cop or a fireman. That was like taboo. And then it was just
Even
like
though
college.
he was.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
There was absolutely no. And he was like probably 100% Irish, but he didn't admit it. He would say he was English and like American Indian because he did not like the whole idea of like the drunk Irishman, like that persona. It was really offensive to him, even though, he may have drank too much. But
What was his last name?
my main name is Hall, Hall. So it actually is an English last name.
Hall. Okay.
But DNA-wise, he's very Irish. But he just didn't like the whole St. Patrick's Day parade, or maybe the
was he
drunk.
like Belfast English,
drunk
like Northern
Catholic.
Ireland English?
No. We've been in this country for many, many years.
Just
But also the Irish cop being the big drinker and stuff, he didn't like to be
That
pigeonholed
stereotype.
like that stereotype. So this is my perception. I'm not sure what my siblings would say. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. But so I really believe it came from him. And it was just never a question. So we all made our way to college. At some point, my brother went to a Merchant Marine Academy, so we didn't have to pay there. And then the next 2, my next brother went to St. John's. He paid for it himself. Then my sister went to a nursing school on Long Island, paid for it for herself. My parents did what they could. And then I luckily was able to, I got into Dartmouth. I swam, so I got recruited. But my father took out a second mortgage on the house to send me to Dartmouth. Wow. So he really did make the sacrifice, which is kind of where I get back to, like, we as a country spend a lot less on education than almost every other country.
Well, if you got into Dartmouth and it was D1 swimming back then,
Yes.
so could you have gotten into a school that would have had a scholarship, or did you apply to a lot of schools? Do you remember? Or?
I really applied to the best schools. So I applied to most of the Ivies. I applied to some D3
Were you in New York at the
programs.
time?
I was on Long Island.
Did you apply
Yeah.
to the SUNY system?
I did. And when I didn't get into I got rejection from Colgate and Amherst, which I thought I was definitely getting in. That was like my safety. Yeah. And then I didn't get in there, and I really kind of had a come to Jesus moment. And I was like, I guess I'm going to Binghamton because I'm definitely not getting into any Ivies. But I did,
Could you have swam at Binghamton?
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so tell that. So then why Dartmouth over Binghamton when given the money?
Oh, I mean, because it was always like get into the best school you can.
Wow. So you could have gotten Binghamton for a lot less.
Yeah, that wasn't even, and I don't want to put down anyone who went to any of the SUNY schools,
Right.
and Binghamton was probably the best SUNY at the time. But, Dartmouth is an education that everyone will recognize no matter where you go,
Right.
and it's special.
Am I wrong? Is it Ivies don't give sports scholarships?
No, they do not.
Yeah.
No athletic scholarships.
Wow.
So.
Like you say, I made my way to Dartmouth, though. Like that wasn't a lot of work and something pretty impressive to get into an Ivy League school?
It was a lot of work. I think I got a little lucky, and I think the time was right. And so the education piece
that says a lot.
my parents were willing to make that sacrifice.
Because kind of leading up to the story about starting the school, your background is fascinating. Like with your father being in the streets, probably seeing horrible things and seeing, what an education can provide and what the lack of an education in some cases can lead to, and then kind of how that value is instilled in you. And then you could have gone for SUNY for a lot less, but you chose the harder path of Dartmouth and having to figure out how to pay for that.
Yeah, a lot of loans and a work study and all that,
Yeah, and talking about it too, it sounds like your family was pretty money conscious growing up, like you're joking about not having goggles.
Yeah.
Yeah, your dad will take out a second mortgage on the house to pay for your education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I got lucky too. I was also the fourth in the family, so three, probably taking a second mortgage out for the first kid would probably not have been the decision he made, but he was very proud of that having gotten into that school. He knew the value of it, and he paid what he could, and I did the rest. And even Dartmouth wants you to be able to afford it, so they try to help you. I got scholarship money too, a lot of scholarship money, academic, not athletic.
That's great.
On my father's side, my father, his father, and then his father's father came over from Tipperary, Ireland, in like the potato famine, 1850. And I remember I grew up the youngest of 13 kids, and when my parents would fight, my mom was more German and Italian, but she would call him Shanty Irish. You're Shanty, and like we had 13 kids, and I hear where you're coming from on all that stuff. So.
My dad was a police officer too for almost 30 years. He finally retired. He's done with that, but it was the same thing, He, I think we're Scots, Irish, Dutch, German. Probably what your dad said. Maybe if I do the 23andMe, I'm 100% Irish. But yeah, it was the same thing. He was never like, hey, don't become a police officer. I think that's a great profession. But it's always kind of, hey, you're good at reading and writing and that stuff. There's something more you want to do. Which it's funny. I started out in the prosecutor's office because I thought I wanted that law enforcement type thing, and I did a year and was like, that's not for me. And I clerked with Jerry, worked here, and there was an opening. I never looked back. I loved it, but yeah, I think there's certain values and things you get from that kind of get passed along through your family, and kind of like how I did too, like work ethic and what it takes to be successful. At least it sounds like based on just what you're saying.
I mean, I think the influence a parent has on what they basically hammer into their kid, where there's just no question about it. And I think had they not done that, like their friends didn't do it, and those kids didn't go to college. So I do credit them with that.
Keep telling your story. So you went to Dartmouth, you swam.
So I went to Dartmouth, I swam. I became an economics major because they didn't have a business major, because I knew that I was going to have a lot of loans to pay off, and I knew that I wanted to make a lot of money because I didn't want to fight like my parents about money. And I'm not trying to put my parents down. It was like, it must have been so stressful having all these kids in Catholic school and not really having the money to afford it. My father moonlighted, and my mom taught piano lessons and things. They did everything they could. But so I did my economics major. I went to Wall Street. I worked for like a financial information company. I knew I was really never going to get to Wall Street itself with that. So I ended up going back to business school, at Columbia Business School, which I paid for myself, and loans, etc. And then that's where I met my husband, Justin. And he was from Los Angeles, and he went to Villanova undergrad, just like you. And then he got his master's in accounting from USC, which he hated. He hated accounting. And if you ever meet him, you'd know why. He's just not an accountant. So then he ended up going to business school. So that's where we met. We had met on the first day.
Is everyone okay in LA right now? I know you have some family out there.
Yeah, we do. My sister-in-law and my brother-in-law are both out there. So my husband's brother and his wife and his sister and her husband and kids. One's in Pasadena, so he is okay, but is ready. He's boiling water and he's kind of ready to go. But the winds have been okay. So, and then his sister is in a safer place. And then, of course, my daughter's at USC in LA, but they seem to be in the concrete jungle. So I think they're going to be okay.
you check it and it's like 14% contained. It's wild.
I know. We just keep waiting for it to be over.
There's like zero humor in this, but I saw someone post in the like Belmar local page, like, are those fires going to reach us with the winds?
Yeah.
Which, you know, obviously that's kind of silly, but it's it's wild to see the footage and things from out there, and it really is such a shame.
I mean, I find it very reminiscent of Sandy. I mean, of her Superstorm Sandy.
Yeah.
I think people have a really short memory. I mean, but that was the devastation of Sandy.
Yeah.
For the many, many miles of devastation of that, I feel like it's very reminiscent. I mean, I would drive around after Sandy and I would just cry because just so much devastation. But Mother Nature.
So you went to Columbia? You said,
I went to Columbia Business School.
Did you go back to working on Wall Street then? Or?
So from business school, I went to work at a hedge fund.
Was that the mortgage derivatives?
Yes.
Training? Okay.
Yes. So I did traded. I had a portfolio and I traded mortgage derivatives and some mostly treasury options. I had a very big mortgage derivatives book at the time. Really, the only woman on Wall Street to do that. I had a really nice opportunity. I always tell the joke. Justin and I got married in 1998. Oh, yeah. Spoiler alert. We got married. He went to work. We went to business school, and then he went to work at First Solomon Brothers, and then he ended up at Goldman. And in 1998, there was this huge interest rate swing, and then the markets were really, really crazy. So I was on the buy side. Do you guys, anyone know financial stuff at all? But the buy side and the sell side. So we were literally on different sides of the market, and it was.
We were bad at math. That's why we're lawyers.
Okay, yeah.
But anyway, tell us.
Anyway, if anyone knows, we were on different sides of the market, and it was really probably the hardest year of our lives, of our marriage, because I was working at a hedge fund that was kind of like going to go under at any minute, and hedge funds our size were going under, and then he's working at one of the best and biggest banks. And they did stand by our hedge fund and helped us with all our financing and stuff. So it all worked out, but it was a really hairy time in 1998. So that was our first year of our marriage.
What can you just explain a little bit what mortgage derivatives are for? Because again, we always think about our listeners, and
Yeah.
you know, I have a working understanding of what that is somewhat, but
Well, I mean, mortgage trading used to be not looked at with such negativity as it is in all the years since 1998. But a mortgage bond, which a mortgage-backed security, is basically 100 different mortgages that a bank underwrote for a customer, and they put them together and they sell them to a bigger bank. So, you know, the local bank doesn't want to hold 30 mortgages and wait 30 years to get paid, so they can turn them over. Another bank buys them at a discount. They package them together, and then they sell them on a traded exchange, traded market, I should say. And then mortgage derivatives is because there's other ways to make money with a mortgage-backed security. You could strip off all the interest and then trade that by itself. So you'd have a huge bond worth $50 million, but you'd take all the interest off and sell that by itself. So that would cause IO, interest only, and then you could do a PO, principal only, and then you could start having formulas about, okay, well, if interest rates go down, you know, these crazy formulas based on they're basically instruments that are created by people on Wall Street, and then they become traded in a secondary market. So a little complicated.
I find that so fascinating though. I remember sitting one time with, you know, again, I'm no like big shot or anything, but with like a financial advisor and being like talking individual stocks, and he's like, there's guys that know what color they're painting the boardroom like that week. He's like, don't even try and like guess and play those equities, and let alone mortgage derivatives and you know, formulas and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to learn it, and it's just you learn it with someone who teaches it well. Everything can be learned, but I think the guys trading a book at home by themselves, I just think that's such a scam. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
All right, so go ahead. So you keep going with your story there.
So
up to the school.
Getting back to the school.
Yeah, let's talk about the school.
I'll just
how did the idea come up? What's the school that you started?
Well,
you know, why'd you do it?
Let me start just one step behind that. Is that Justin and I moved to New Jersey because my brother moved here, and he knew it because he was from Villanova, and I always thought our kids would go to Catholic school because I went to Catholic school, but because of Dartmouth and because of Columbia, I became a little bit, and I'm proud to say I'm a little bit of an education snob, because I think that not only is it great getting a great education, but when you surround yourself with people all with that higher, higher learning, desire to get higher learning, I think you're really surrounding yourself. That's a big part of education. So sometimes people say it's not worth it to go to college. I'm like, but it is worth it to surround yourself with really smart people.
I think it's similar to sports. Like if I play pickup basketball with like a group that's not as good, you play down to them. If you play with a group that's better, you play up to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Surfing's the same way. Like if you're in the water and you're surfing and no one's around, you're like, whatever. But if there's really good surfers out there, you'll surf better just because they're there with you.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
But I do think that's such a valuable thing. So when we did move to Rumson, there was a Catholic grammar school we could have sent the kids to. And we chose to send them to Rumson Country Day. And that's no judgment on anyone. My sister's kids went to Holy Cross, which is the local Catholic school. But for me, I just thought you only have this one chance to educate them. I want to put them in the best academic school possible. And in my mind, that was Rumson Country Day. And I was confident I was going to teach them the religious stuff at home. So that was, I really, really cared about education. So that's kind of bringing me to, and just let me back up in a moment. In 2002, there was a group of women in Rumson, 2 women actually, who wanted to start an independent high school. So I worked with them on their feasibility study. They were promised a piece of land, never came through. That fell apart.
Also a girls' school they wanted to start?
No, they just wanted to do an independent school.
Got it.
Promised by who? Was that through the diocese?
I believe, and I hope I believe it was promised to them by Peter Gerhard, who was a pre-IPO partner at Goldman. He's a friend of my husband's, so I'm not saying anything. I don't think he reneged on any promise. I just think the land didn't come through. And the land will turn out later in the podcast a very important part of Trinity Hall. But so for me, when it was time for our oldest, which was a girl, she was end of 6th grade going to 7th grade. So at this point, I had 4 girls. I had 4 girls, 1 boy, and one of our sons had passed away at that point. So I just didn't know where to send her to high school. And she was getting recruited by Petty, in particular, boarding school, because she was a phenomenal swimmer. And the thought of sending her away was just...
Is it Connecticut?
No, it's in New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
It's in, Hightstown.
Hightstown.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. But they've been known to have a very good swim team. Even kids I swam with on Long Island would go there for swimming. But the thought of sending her away was just not for us. And I'm gonna regress one more second. In 2007, my husband Sean Clifford and my brother-in-law Henry Sullivan had an opportunity. My brother-in-law Henry's cousin knew Bishop Smith, and they had a meeting in some Notre Dame high school in, I want to say, Lawrenceville or something. And they had a meeting with the bishop then about starting an all-girls school in 2007. And then that kind of died down a little bit. But then so at this point, when my oldest is in 6th grade, the Cliffords had 3 girls. Their oldest was in 5th grade, and both kind of going into the next grade. So time was getting really tight, and we were like, are we going to do this or what? And so at that point, we just decided the best thing to do is do a feasibility study. So the 2 couples paid for a feasibility study. And before that, we went to the bishop, which at this point is Bishop O'Connell. We thought because he came through the ranks through, I think, Catholic University, he came up through education. So we just thought he would be much more open to the idea. And we could talk about why we wanted it to be a Catholic school in a minute. But so we went to him and said, listen, we would like your blessing. We're going to do a feasibility study on opening an all-girls school. And if I remember correctly, he only would speak to my husband and Sean Clifford.
What does the feasibility study entail? Is that like seeing, hey, will there be enough girls that are interested?
Yeah.
Does it make
sense?
So
you get a consultant. If you want to do it correctly, you
Were
get
they
a
from
consultant.
Wisconsin?
They were from Wisconsin,
Wow.
yeah. So Meitler Consulting, they were supposedly known as the best consultant to do a feasibility study. And they help you kind of come up with questions. I thought they were just going to come up with the questions, the database, and send this thing out. And are we right or are we wrong? But the feasibility piece of it was really challenging for a number of reasons. Probably one of our first obstacles that came up was we hire the consultant ourselves. The bishop gives us his blessing. I think later on he sold it as he told us to do it, or he paid for it, or it was his idea. I don't know, but it wasn't. And we had all these questions that we worked with the consultant on, like, and what would tell us exactly, like, is this a feasible study? Are we just living a pipe dream? Is this something that could be viable? What are the demographics in our area? How would those change over time? Would we be able to get enough girls? So we also had focus groups. So we had parents of anyone who kind of had heard about us. We would just get the word out to say we're doing these focus groups because we wanted to know what was important to parents. So when we finalized the feasibility study and the bishop gave us his blessing, we went to the offices in Trenton and said, okay, so can we have your database because we want to distribute this feasibility study? And they were told, no, you cannot have our database. And we were like, but the bishop said we could do it. And they're like, you could do it, but we're not giving you our database. So we were shocked by that. And so we had to build a database from scratch, which was word of mouth. We weren't allowed to distribute the feasibility studies in any Catholic school. We would wait outside of church and hand it to people. We had an online, we'd do it by email. We did everything we could. And I have to say, Mairead and Sean Clifford were incredible they're both so detail oriented. So they really got the word out. And
At this point, is the school, it's a go, and this is, hey, join the school. This is just focus group stuff.
It's focus group. It's trying to get it's research.
Got it.
So it's still like very early on in the stage.
And what year is this? 2010, 2011?
I want to say it's 2011. And I do that all from like, when did my daughter graduate, 8th grade?
That's fine.
So anyway.
NJ.com's article from September of 2011 is talking about you guys getting the thing going.
Yeah. So, and you can't just do a feasibility study and get 200 people to fill it out. You have to have thousands of submissions for it to be viable or, considered to have efficacy in terms of your argument. So we did get enough people to fill it out. It was a huge work in progress. And we finally said, okay, we're going to take this and we're going to present it to the bishop. And so we went to the Diocese of Trenton, the four of us, Mairead, Sean, Justin, and I, and we went to meet the bishop. And he comes out and he's got a gigantic cross and he's all decked out. And there's about 10 priests, vicars, brothers behind him. And he would only let my husband and Sean Clifford in the room. And Mairead and I sat outside. And they made a presentation to him of all the results of the feasibility study.
So can you just tell me a little details about that? Like,
sure.
So they wouldn't talk to you or Mairead.
Well, they acknowledged us.
And then they wouldn't. How does that work? Oh no, these two stay out here. Like, how does that actually work at that meeting?
I mean, it was
Did
their
Justin
turf.
have to come out and be like, Victoria, you got? Like,
No, it was just like, okay, Sean and Justin come in and present the results to the group.
That's weird. All right, but anyway.
It's weird. It wasn't like it was a little par for the course. I mean, it's not that I wasn't that shocked, but ridiculous all the same. So they made a presentation to the bishop, and he sat on that presentation and he had all the results, and it's diced and sliced a million different ways to see how you could look at the data. So it took months for the bishop to get back to us, and he said he predicated his denial on one question in particular, which I fault the consultants on, because there was one question that said, rank what's most important to you about educating your child or your daughter. And he said not enough people checked off all girls. And I said, well, if people live in our area, it couldn't possibly be the top number one thing because there is no all-girls school. Mm-hmm. So frankly, he used that to say not enough people think it's the most important thing. You don't have a really good argument here, and I'm not going to give you the Catholic stamp of approval. Now, my husband's always a lot more patient and kind of understanding than I am. He maintained a pretty good relationship with the bishop, but the bishop knew we could do it. We were going to do it ourselves because we did say we're going to do it anyway.
What's the negative of them approving that? Like, why would they not want to see a Catholic school formed and you guys backing it? And...
Well, I think if I'm being generous, you would say, listen, it's a business, and their business is keeping their Catholic high schools healthy. So at the time, there was Mater Dei, which was struggling. There's St. Rose, RBC. So if it's kind of like letting a new business open up into your backyard. So they probably would have been furious.
Okay. The concern would be you would pull girls from those schools?
Yeah. And what I realized and what I always tried to make the argument is that I think the bishop looked at the pie as a certain size. But the pie, with opening an all-girls school, the pie got a lot bigger. So you could still really have gotten those schools to do well, even if we opened up, because it's basically a different product. It's really not competing against any of the schools that were in business already. Sure. We were wanted to be a STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math school. We wanted to be independent, and we wanted to be all girls. So we didn't have any competition in terms of the education that was out there. There are no all-girls schools. So it was a short-sighted decision. Of course, that fueled us even more. And I remember specifically the Cliffords and the Gmelichs went out to dinner at what was then Fromagerie in Rumson. And we raised a glass and said, are we going to do it? And so we just went forward and did it. And from there, it was even more of a shit show.
So you went forward and started the school anyways without the Catholic
Well, what
Church's
we decided to do, I mean, we did a lot of research and we got a lot of people to weigh in. We had a group, a working group. We had a working group called Monmouth Girls Academy, MGA. I actually kind of liked that name way back when, but it was called Monmouth Girls Academy, and we had, a principal on it, and we actually had a woman named Allison Wagner, who her parents were part of the group that tried to start it in the 70s.
Wow.
So she was on our working group and has became a really, really close friend.
We're good? Yeah, it's all right. We're good.
So
I just hear the noise. Yeah. All right, cool.
So what we started to do was come up with our mission and write it out, come up with what was going to be the curriculum. And we just looked at all different all-girls schools all over the country.
So I think Jerry kind of asked you this from the beginning, but it's like fascinating. You don't hear about people starting a school, and it's like, where do you even begin? Like when we first sat down, like LeBron James is who I think of as someone that's like started a school and is like giving back to the community and things. Like, do you identify a piece of property and say, okay, now we're going to put a building? Do you say, hey, what's the curriculum going to be?
She's getting there.
Yeah,
keep
it's probably what jumps out at people is like how easy was it? How hard was it? Don't you just do this? And it was really a learning experience because I said to Jerry earlier, my husband and I pledged $2 million to this project. And we said, we have to be able to find a piece of land in Monmouth County for $2 million, that's zoned for a school. We weren't looking for a building, we were just looking for a piece of land. So that was kind of step one, but actually shouldn't have been step one. Our step one, all along we're doing the curriculum and we're trying to figure out who our leadership is gonna be. We got really lucky because we got an email.
Do you have a staff at this point, or it's just 4 people?
No, it's 4 people, but we have our little working group, our little Monmouth Girls Academy. So Allison, whom I mentioned, was doing some marketing. And then we had a principal of a grammar school who's like, well, you have to think about this. And then, we would just ask questions.
And they're all volunteers?
Yeah, all volunteers.
Wow. Okay,
and Brother Frank from CBA was very generous he let us have meetings at CBA.
He's a great guy, Brother Frank.
He's a great guy. And I'm sure that was against the bishop's wishes, but he he never complained to us. He never said the bishop's giving me a hard time, but I'm sure the bishop was giving him a hard time, but he just let us do it. So we had meetings there. We were working on everything from curriculum and who we're going to hire, how many people we need to hire. But we realized, and the way we realized this was we got an email one day from a guy named James Palmieri, who worked at Kent Place, which is a very good all-girls school in Summit, New Jersey. And he said, listen, I heard you're opening an all-girls school. I just so happened to be doing my dissertation on the last 10 all-girls schools opened up in the country, or 5 all-girls schools opened up in the country. He goes, so I'd really like to meet you.
Wow.
So we were like, well, we'd really like to meet you too. So we met him and decided, and he knew everything from cafeteria to who do you hire and coaches and how you do the classes. And so we hired him as a consultant at a certain amount of dollars per hour, whatever we thought was fair. But I think he got so into it that I think he was probably making like $1 an hour because he was just working all the time on it. And our plan was when we get ready to open, he's going to come in and work with us. But he said, listen, you'd really do yourself a favor, because we're like, you can be our head of school. And he said, really, you want a woman to be your head of school. So hire a woman, which I thought was pretty selfless because, for him, he was a young guy, and him jumping into a head of school position would have been great for his career. But he said, you really should hire a woman. But he did help us go around and put on a lot of presentations. So we put on presentations at Holy Cross in the school. He got in trouble. Rumson Country Day, they let us put a presentation on there. That was no problem. We hired a room out, a big room out at Monmouth University, and did a presentation there. And really just Q&A with people who were interested. We would advertise it in the paper, and we would try to spread the word, like there's this Q&A for this school that's going to open. But I always kind of say, in looking back and during these things, people would ask questions, and I would lie a lot, or I would just bullshit a lot. So they'd be like, are you going to have this? And I'd be like, yeah, we're going to have this. And we're going to have the best paid teachers, and we're going to have the best sports, and we're going to have this, and we're going to have that. And I had people telling me, you'll never get it off the ground.
You sound like a certain Poltician. I heard, whose name I don't want to say anything because I want hundreds of thousands of people to hear this podcast.
No, but
get flagged if we talk.
I know myself. If I tell you something, I'm going to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
When I had Parker, who was my 5th child, I was really, really heavy, and I said, you know what? I'm going to tell everybody that I'm going to run the marathon, because if I tell enough people that I'm going to have to do it, and then I'm going to have to train, and then I'm going to lose weight, and I was just like, okay, I told everybody, and I did it. I did it very poorly, but I did it.
Wow,
but
awesome.
I'm one of those people. So people were telling me, like educators were like, you'll never get the athletics off the ground. You'll never get the students. You'll never get this. You'll never get that. And James Palmieri, this consultant, he really was really helpful in so many ways. And then another obstacle we had, I don't know if you want me to keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah,
it's a
fascinating.
fascinating
There's
story.
so many moving parts.
Fascinating story.
Yeah.
So James was always going to symposiums, education things that were just which we weren't going to because we weren't in that field. And he said, there's a woman that I think you should try to hire. Her name's Arlene. I won't give you her last name. And she started a school out in California. And she actually, I think, was one of the founders of the National Coalition of Girls' Schools. And we were like, oh my gosh, we have to meet her. So we called her. She decided to fly out. We met her. She was very capable. She wasn't the warmest or the fuzziest. And at the end of the day, she was interested, but she really didn't want this job. And we kind of hired her. And then I think it was Mairead was like, I don't think she really wants this job. And then she was a little MIA, didn't call us back. And then we were like, what are we going to do? We're supposed to open. And so timeline, I'll have to get back to the timeline a little bit. This is before Superstorm Sandy.
So you've identified a property at this point? You have a structure?
No, we still don't have a property.
Wow.
No, still don't have a property. Still looking. That was, a lot of things were happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So Mairead and I were, our husbands were working in the city, so we would go, we looked at every piece of property, every building on the fort, Monmouth, every building in Monmouth County. I mean, a convent in Marlborough, which I think just got purchased by someone else. They started something there. I mean, we looked at every possible thing that you could buy, and obviously the $2 million, we're going to need a lot more than that. And zoning was a real challenge, which I guess you guys as lawyers realize that the zoning was a huge problem. So that came up. But the first obstacle, or maybe we're at the second at this point, was we hired a woman who kind of didn't want the job. And if I back up
For
a
what
moment,
job was it that you
so head of school.
Okay.
So this consultant, James, said, listen, you don't have to really think about the curriculum or the classes or who you have to hire. You have one employee, you have to hire a head of school, and you got to get a good one who knows how to open a school. And so that's a really tall order. So we had, so I kind of laugh because looking back, we put the cart before the horse so many times. So there were times we would look at a piece of property, or we would meet with architects and engineers, and we say, we want to build this and we want drawings. And then we're like, we don't even have a piece of land. Like, this is crazy. So then we did go up to Oak Knoll School of the Holy Child in Summit as well. And we were taking a tour with an architect to show us some of the work he's done, because he wanted to be our architect when we had no land. And we met the head of the upper school, who was the assistant head at Oak Knoll. And I met her, and I mean, she'll laugh at this because we've kind of we've hashed it out. But I looked at her and I was like, okay. First I thought maybe she was a nun because, she was just, young, not young, a little older, walking around, talked to the girls. She seemed like she was working very, and they had a head of school, which is a male head of school. And he said, you should hire Mary Scarillo as your head. And so in Wall Street speak, if someone's trying to get rid of someone, that means they're terrible. So like in Wall Street, if you think someone's great, you're like, yeah, no, he's with me,
Yeah.
she's with me. So I said, because I don't have some filter sometimes, I go, well, why would you want to give her away if she was so good? And he told her. And so and anyway, it didn't matter at the time, but I was just like, she couldn't be that good if he doesn't care. But now I've come to learn in the educational field, it's actually a feather in your cap if you get one of your underlings to go and take a higher level job at a school. Like they really work well. Like they try to build each other up. So not a Wall Street thing, but so then we had no head of school when this woman, Arlene, flaked. So I remember being away in Rome with my husband for like a business trip, and I was crying. We were on a run. I was crying. He's like, we just can't open. I said, at this point, I took such pride in it. It was just like, I couldn't let it go. And he's like,
how far out are you at this point from September?
We are,
like a September start date?
We're probably a little bit more than a year out.
Okay.
So
You
she's
have
probably starting 8th grade.
I was gonna say, and behind the scenes, you have your
Maybe
own
end of 7th grade, yeah.
personal, like your daughter.
Yeah.
Where is she going to go
Yeah.
to school?
Yeah. And it became more than that. It wasn't just about her. It
Of
just
course.
became, I don't know why, I took it so to heart. Sean and Justin and Maria were easy to be like, okay, like, let's just roll with it. And I was just like, oh. So I said, why don't we go up to Oak Knoll and try to poach that woman? And they're like, and the guy, James, said, that's a really good idea. You should go up and do that. So I was so it was it was before Hurricane Sandy happened. I called this woman, and she was like cold as ice to me on the phone. And I said, hi, it's Victoria Gmelich. Do you know who I am? She goes, I know who you are. And I said, because she had seen that we were on to open an all-girls school. And I find out later that that she had always said to her husband, I really want to open an all-girls school in Monmouth County, because she and her husband decided to raise their kids up north so that she could send her girls to an all-girls school. So it was that important to her. So this was kind of her dream, but since I had said what I said to her, she was mad at me. But she also wasn't really willing ready to jump off the cliff a little bit. I always call jumping off the cliff. So we would have meetings with her up at Oak Knoll, and we'd walk in and we'd have a discussion. She'd be like, no, I'm not your person. Then we'd leave, and then I'd call her, and somehow it became my job to call her. So I was so nervous calling this woman. And I would go, my husband would be like, go call her right now. So I'd go up to our bedroom. We had all these little kids. And I would say the rosary beforehand. And he's like, did you call her? And I'm like, I am. I'm going to call her right now. So I'd call her and I'd be so nervous. And she would start with a no. And then by the end, I was like, oh man, I think I'm at a maybe. And it was just that, like, I kept calling her and begging her. And then I was like, you're really our only shot. And she's like, she goes, you could actually do it, Victoria. You could do it. She's like, there are women who have their MBA and they've, like, I think it was the woman of biotech. She was an MBA and she opened up biotech. She was assigned to open up biotech.
What's the money situation at this point? Are you like, we'll pay you more money, or that's not even part of the discussion?
We'll pay you more money.
Okay.
Pay you more money. We'll pay for car services for you to get down. We'll make like whatever you want, we're going to do. Got it. And she was like, I have to think about it. Because if you think about it, she was at Oak Knoll. You don't know this, but she was at Oak Knoll for 26 years. She was beloved at Oak Knoll. She made a very decent amount of money. And she had a job she loved. So it's like, for her to jump in with us is like pretty much everything's downside. But she knew how much we needed her. She thought it was a great idea. And she said she would think about it.
Not the exact dollar amounts, but generally speaking, what is ahead of a school for a private school in New Jersey get roughly? Like, what is this?
You do not want to know. I mean, it depends if you're talking about the head of school at Ranney or you're talking about the head of school. $250,000 to $400,000. Yeah, it's a lot. I think it's a lot. So yeah, she was going to make more money, but really that wasn't important to her. I think her legacy in being a really beloved educator. She wasn't even a teacher. She's really an administrator. Her husband said to her, like, what if it fails? And she's like, you know what? If it fails, I'm just going to do everything else I love. Like, I love to do Pilates. I love to do these things. I'm just going to, if it fails, it fails. So we were waiting to hear back from her, and then Superstorm Sandy hit. And so that's October of my daughter's 8th grade. So we, as a school, we were telling everybody we're opening. And so we had this kind of following of people who thought we were opening. And it was just radio silence through Superstorm Sandy from us, because we were like, we don't have a head. No one knew that we had fired the other head. And we had no power, obviously, for like 4 weeks. And so finally I called her and I said, Mary, listen, it's now or never. Are you going to do it or not? Because we have to tell people. And so it was right before Christmas. We made the announcement that we hired her and that we were absolutely opening.
Awesome.
So at that point, we still had no land and we had no students, but we were opening. Well, we did have my daughter. She was going to be a student.
Did you have a backup? Like, what was the plan? If you couldn't identify land and a structure, did you have contingencies? Like, all right, we'll go here for the time being.
There's no plan B.
We had about, we had about 10 irons in the fire in terms of land. And the one thing we always said to us, like, you can't have a plan B. You're opening, you better figure it out. And I had faith we were going to figure it out. And then someone from, I think it was like Fort Monmouth, called Sean Clifford, or someone from Middletown called Sean Clifford and said, listen, there is a building called Croydon Hall in Middletown that Middletown, I guess, I don't know what they used it for, to give out dog licenses or some things like that. And they're going to vacate it. And, maybe you could start your school there. So if you think about it, all we needed was, we wanted to have 30 girls in our first class. And all we needed was to educate those 30 girls for 1 year. So this building, we went in, we struck a deal, we paid a lot of rent. We went in with architects and we gutted it and made it really beautiful from the inside. It wasn't that nice on the outside.
What was the time window to do this?
Months.
Wow.
Months. Yeah. So, we have video of when we did open that, I don't know, it was probably September 9th of 2013, of the buses pulling up, and, it's very, very surreal. Wow.
The contractors are running off site.
Yeah. No, Mary was there welcoming the girls. Marie and I were there just kind of like to take it all in. It was very clear from the beginning that the head of school is like, I'm the head of school, you're on the board. So there is this, we always did want to do everything right from the beginning. So separation of church and state, of the, board and running a school. So the governance of the school, we really wanted to do everything right from the beginning. And not too many people have that opportunity. If you go into any school, there's things in place that have been around for so long that you can't change, and it's very hard to make changes. So we had a blank slate, and Mary Scrillo had a blank slate, and she helped with what we decided was going to be the curriculum. She worked with James. James was the consultant. He became the assistant head of school. And so that is how we started with our first class.
So tell us about the first day. If we're to walk in there, how many classrooms are there? How many teachers do you have? Are there any sports teams? And who are these 30 girls that decided to jump in the water like this?
Yeah. I call it jumping off the cliff. They were random girls. I mean, there were 3 girls came from Rumson Country Day. I had this a little bit of pride about myself that I wasn't going to lobby people from Rumson Country Day, because in a lot of ways, I think they thought they were too good for the school. Right. One woman in particular, she's like, she did come to everything, and she looked at the school and then like very flippantly said, yeah, it's not the school for us, but good luck. And I was really hurt because she was a friend. And that's a whole nother long story. But a friend said to me, he goes, listen, it's not time to play hard to get. You got to get some students. So Mary, our head of school, and James, our assistant, they worked really hard. We were just really trying to get people interested. And you really had to have the girls want to come, but you had to have the family buy-in, because it was not going to be a normal school. And in terms of sports, in terms of teachers, we had all the teachers to teach what needed to be taught. So we only had one language. We started with Spanish.
So how many teachers in that first day?
Gosh, I mean, I don't know exactly, probably like 14, 15.
Wow, already?
Well, you have to teach all the sciences, then you have to teach
You said 15 teachers? 14 to 15?
I might be over. I think there's at least 12, because you had, you had the
30 girls,
humanities.
That's an amazing ratio.
Yeah. I mean, our expenses were so expensive that first year. And
getting into that, so you said you guys basically fronted money to get everything started, and then there's a board. Where do the funds come from? How does it work? Do the boards act as like trustees essentially?
Yeah, so I'll explain. The board of trustees for an independent school, most independent schools have a board of trustees. Mm-hmm. Most Catholic diocesan schools will have a principal who reports probably to the priest of the church. So there's all different ways you can run a school. But we decided we wanted to have the board of trustees, and we wanted to have our head of school. So the role of the board of trustees is 2 things only. Number 1, to support the head of school, give her everything she needs to be successful. And number 2, ensure the fiscal responsibility of the school. So fiscal health of the school, I should say. So it was our job. So we did put together a board. It was small in the beginning, so it was obviously the 4 founders. And then we added people who seemed to make sense. It was a little Rumson heavy in the beginning. I mean, we took whoever wanted to do it. Not whoever wanted to do it. We wanted people who kind of had a role, whether it be legal or educator or religious, things like that. So we put together the board of trustees, who we would meet, and we would talk about all the challenges. So there were many. But getting back to the teachers, I mean, I don't know how many teachers, maybe it was 12, but there were a lot, because we had to teach art, we had to teach music, we had to teach the humanities, we had to teach the language, the maths, and the sciences. So if you think about it, that's a lot. And then we had to hire coaches. And we pretty much told every girl, you have to be on a sport every season, and we don't care if you've never played before, because we needed to have teams.
Field teams.
Yeah. So it was comical, I'm sure, to other schools. I mean, I'm sure we were laughed at.
What's the tuition at that point?
The tuition was $13,000, so it was heavily subsidized, the tuition. We did get some donations. I mean, since the beginning, my husband and I have been in charge of fundraising. That has been a big part of our role. My husband went to Villanova undergrad. He was very involved at Villanova. Was, I think, vice chair of the board at the time we were opening the school. He was chair of the board for like 8 years. I sat on some advisory boards at Dartmouth, so I understood the whole board of trustees. I understood schools are always asking for money. So I didn't feel quite as uncomfortable asking other people for money. So I really asked every single person I knew for money. My husband and I were really on the hook for a lot of money. Thankfully, we had the funds. Sean and Marie had made a big pledge in the beginning. They were making good on their pledge. So we were cobbling together funds. We knew, I mean, it was lucky that my husband and I had the resources to basically fill in the gaps if we had to. And the tuition was, as I said, was like really artificially low. But we had to get people. So I think it was $13,750. So that's how we started off. So
tell us some like sports stories. Like you said, it was.
Oh my gosh! Like,
80 to 12 basketball games.
I mean, some girls never having played soccer before, getting like knocked around by, say, the RBRs of the world. I mean, there's some fun stories where my daughter scored the first Trinity Hall goal ever, and she's never played soccer before. So it's probably like maybe the third game where our first goal was scored. But the one big success story we had was that my daughter was, as I said, a really phenomenal swimmer, and she brought 3 swimmers with her. So one from her team, one from Rumson Country Day, and another girl who was a swimmer for another team. And so right away, we had a good swim team. We had a swim team of 9 girls, one of which had never swum. She didn't know how to breathe to the side. She just swam a lap. We were like, well, this is challenging. So we had 9 girls, and we asked Rani to swim us in a scrimmage. And the AD at Rani at the time was my daughter's first coach ever when she was 6 years old. And I'm sure he was advised by the board, but Rani would not swim us, even though we only had 9 girls. So we always have challenges like that. But for example, Villa Walsh, which is an all-girls school up north, they're like, we'll swim you. You know, they were a little shocked when some of the big girls were getting beaten. But every year our swim team was getting bigger and better. And we did have some other athletic challenges, but by our junior year, we had won counties, and senior year we had won state championship. Like we did pave the way with swimming. So we were like very respected on that front. But here's a fun thing that happened was the shore conference said you can't be part of shore conference until you have, I think he said 10 varsity sports, and we had 30 girls. And clearly our girls were not good enough to be varsity. Mm-hmm. So our head of school said, listen, we're an all-girls school, so 5 would be the number. And if you don't let us in next year, we're going to sue you. So they let us in.
9 or 11 or whatever.
I mean, I think Shore Conference is still run by an all-boys club. I mean, I don't even know if there's still any women on it. I'm not afraid to say that. I really don't care. But we were allowed to swim at counties freshman year because counties is not run by Shore Conference. But even the director of the counties meet said, we're not going to score you this year because the Shore Conference says you don't get scored the first year. But we weren't part of Shore Conference, and they really had no bearing on that counties meet. So we had 5 girls at counties, and we got 4th place overall. But we didn't get scored because they decided we didn't deserve to. And then that year when we were on counties, they have the T-shirt that shows all the high schools in the county, and they didn't have us on there.
That's nice.
And I went crazy, so crazy.
So go ahead, keep going forward in the story. Like you start out with the 30 girls, you're in Middletown. Like how did it grow?
Okay, so we're in a rental property. We have a 2-year rental in Middletown, and we're saying to ourselves, okay, 2 years, like let's take a breath. We're gonna find something in 2 years.
What's the physical structure look like? I know you asked a little bit. I'm trying to picture it. Like, is it?
You could see a picture online. I mean, it is a flat-topped 1-story building in the shape of perhaps an L, a little bit of an L. Ugly windows. I mean, we beautified it as much as we could, but really what was beautiful was the inside. We really made it the lab state of the art. We had a really beautiful small, wood paneled chapel. So the girls really had what they needed in a very nice fashion inside, but the outside was ugly.
Athletic fields on premises, or
there was a gymnasium, which they allowed us to use. I think we had to rent it. So we used the gymnasium, and sometimes gym or whatever it was the girls would walk over to the gymnasium. I mean, we really had no space. There were fields, but Pop Warner used them, so we kind of used them. We had to rent out everything, and still to this day, we still rent out a lot of fields. But we have really the best sports around, and you can do that renting out fields. You just have to get the girls what they need to succeed. So whether the field's in their backyard or the field is something you get bused to, if you have a field to practice on, you have a good coach, and you have good spirit, you're going to succeed. So I think that it's a lot more expensive. The busing's expensive. Renting the fields are expensive. But, these big schools, or even Rani, look at Rani, they have so many resources there. They have so much land. It's expensive to maintain that land. Yeah. So in some ways it's like, hey, yeah, I'd love to build you 2 more fields, but also that's a lot more to run. I mean, we don't have the money to build fields right now, but we're waiting for some land to be donated to us. We have a lot of things in the works, but all these things take money. So you have to think about it. You have to think about what are your operations? I mean,
I have another kind of silly question.
Sure.
So when you start out, it's 30 girls. Do they all need to come in as freshmen, or is it high school age girls?
They all have to come in as freshmen.
Wow.
So the way to start any school is you start with the first class and then you fill in behind them.
Wow.
So we had the 30 girls, but we were immediately, and I say we, meaning the board and the school, but we really did let the school do what they felt was right in terms of recruiting the next class. But we were really all wearing a lot of hats in the beginning. Because we were just very understaffed, and we just all really wanted it to succeed. So the next class that we recruited was, I think, 65 girls. Uh-huh. So it was Croydon Hall was getting, that's what it was called, very crowded at that point. And so it was kind of a joke because girls, we have so many pictures of the girls over the years, and so many of them are literally sitting in the hallway, doing their work in the hallway, eating in the hallway, talking to each other in the hallway. Like some of the girls were like, do you remember, like my daughter was in that first class, and they all talk about, do you remember how much fun it was just being in the hallway, like just sitting in the hall? So it's kind of like funny Trinity Hall.
How did you guys come up with the name? Like, how did that happen?
It was hard to figure out a name. As I said, I kind of liked Monmouth Girls Academy, but I think we did want to have, so I don't think we ever addressed this, but instead of being a Catholic school, we are not a Catholic school. Yeah. We are an independent school in the Catholic tradition. So in many ways, that was such a blessing for us because, having a school that's not Catholic, it doesn't have anything to do with the Catholic Church. They can't say anything about what we do or teach. And I will mention that I think we are a lot more Catholic than a lot of Catholic schools. But we are also looked at as a school that's very open to every faith.
Sometimes you got to be careful of the people that sit in the front row at church, They're the ones you got to keep your eye on.
Yes, I think, but I do sit in the front. Did you say that for me? Because I do sit in the front row. But anyway.
I said sometimes, some of the people.
But, we didn't want to be teaching Catholic dogma anyway. Yeah. We wanted to teach world theology. So we really wanted to be very innovative in everything we did, and we felt that we wanted to be open to every faith and really understanding each other's theology and having girls be able to speak about it openly is where we need to be in this world. It's going to come down to women to forge peace in this world, right? But so it was a blessing so we opened up in the Catholic tradition, which really means Catholic values, which is really any religious values that are, morally upheld are good values. Golden rule kind of thing.
What do you think of the benefits of kind of marrying religion and education and having that all part of Trinity?
Well, me personally, I grew up going to Catholic schools, and I really took a lot of comfort in my faith and really having it hammered in. I mean, we prayed a lot. I pray all the time. As a child, I prayed all the time, and my sisters and so I really feel like I learned that in Catholic school. So I really loved that about Catholic school. And I think it gives you the idea of walking into a place where you can be open about your spirituality and making sure that girls felt comfortable with their spirituality. And I think it's a kind of a funny side note. At Rumson Country Day, I often had trouble with, it would be the holiday show that I would always work on and decorate, and you'd go and the kids would be singing Kwanzaa songs, Hanukkah songs, and Frosty the Snowman. And I'd be like, literally, I looked around and I said, 80% of the kids who go here are Christian in some form. And I haven't heard one religious Catholic song, so I got in so I ended up taking over the Christmas show, the holiday show, for a while. And but I pointed out to that head of school, Chad Small, who was actually very helpful with Trinity Hall as well. I said, Chad, there was just happened to be the Virginia Tech shooting. And I said, Chad, whenever there's a school shooting, whenever something really bad happens, every politician, every person in leadership, they pray. They talk about prayers. They talk about our, our hearts and our prayers are with you. So I said, it's important to pray. It's important to have that part. I think and I'm not ashamed of it. I could meet someone on the street who tells me something bad happened. I said, I'm going to pray for you. I have no problem with it. I think most people don't have a problem with it. So I think it's a great comfort for the girls. And we have girls who are Jewish. Our first president of our class was Muslim.
Wow.
And we have mass at school, but not very often. But it's also, I think it's very entertaining, the masses we have. We have great music and, we have some good homilies.
Sounds like my church.
I was at one mass at Trinity Hall where the president of Villanova gave the mass. That was kind of cool.
Yes. That was the dedication of the building.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He's Father Peter. He's pretty special.
Yeah.
So you go from a school where there's 30 girls hanging out, and then 60 come in. So again,
65
not great at
come in.
math, but now you have 95 girls in the school.
So we have 95 girls in the school, and it's coming towards the end of the second year, and we still don't have a place. But we did have a place because we bought. So here's the interesting part: is we bought during this time. So it was probably during the girls' freshman year. We entered into a contract to buy a 66-acre piece of land on Chapel Hill Road in Middletown. And the owners were going to sell it to us. It was zoned to open a school. We went to some neighbors and said, listen, this is who we are. This is what we want to do. We want to build on 8 acres interiorly on this piece of land. It was a giant piece of land. And are you good with it? So we went to a few neighbors and they're like, yeah, we don't care. When we went to the town, we didn't even need any kind of, what is it called, variance?
Something like that, yeah.
You guys know. We didn't need a variance, but we went to file our plans. People came out of the woodwork. I like to call them NIMBYs, the not in my backyard. People who were in Middletown, not even near the piece of property, came out in droves. I mean, I walked into the meeting thinking it's going to be, okay, we're going to get our approvals, then we're going to hire our architects, and then we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It was packed. From day one, even when we were trying to get the word out about our school, so I'm going backwards a little bit. We had chosen our colors as orange and blue because we wanted to be different. No one had orange and blue around here. So anything I went to, Trinity Hall, whether it was a CBA picnic, anything that would talk about Trinity Hall, I would wear orange and blue. So I had so many orange dresses, blue dresses, every kind of, even the head of school, she said, I've never met 2 women who've worn the same thing over and over and over again, because that was our mantra. So I walked in and all the Trinity Hall people, which were our board and maybe some parents, are all in orange. So we would be together. But it was packed. And even one of the people on the zoning board was like, I don't know, the zoning board or the planning board was like, I guess orange is your color. And we're like, yep. But anyway, people were hostile from moment one. They did not want us to build there.
What's on the land now? Is it just woods? Or?
Okay, so you're talking, it is 10 years ago.
I'm sorry, back then.
Back then, I'm saying it's in 2025 now.
Yeah.
10 years ago, when we were looking at it 10 years ago, it was open, like it was woods.
It was woods. All woods.
And,
okay.
and you'll know it. You'll drive by it. It's a corner of Chapel Hill Road and what is that, Kings Highway.
Yeah.
And it was woods. And it was a piece of land that the owners had the right to sell. It was zoned to be, it could be a school. It could have been a lot of things, but it was zoned, allowed to be a school. And these people came out and just fought as hard as they could against us for a year.
Where they're like, they do traffic studies.
Everything,
and things
traffic
like that.
studies. They made us do a traffic study. They brought out everything. They bashed us for, they said there were going to be accidents on the road because all our girls would be drinking and driving. There was one woman in Middletown had an adult autistic child. She said, my son likes to walk on that road. Your girls are going to hit him. There's going to be noise. There's going to be buses. There's going to be this and that. And it was just, everybody needed to be heard. So if your courtroom is filled with 100 people and they all want to speak, your 6-hour meeting is gone, and then you have to go to the next meeting.
Yeah.
So all the legal presentations and architect presentations, engineering presentations, we could never get through them, and people would be, so then we would go, we were just trying to please people, so we'd go back and change it, or we'd say, okay, I mean, you can't have a neon sign. We're like, okay, we won't have a neon sign. None of your girls can drive when they're seniors. Okay, we want them. Like, I was just giving in, and our lawyer, John Junko, he has been the best. He still is the best. He's a very big land use attorney around here, and I think it was very heartbreaking for him because our opponents hired Ron Gazarowski, who is known to delay. And the sad thing is that we were on a timeline. And if we didn't get out of that rental and get into some place, we were going to go out of business. And they knew that, and that was their goal. So, I mean, that hurts a lot. And there's a couple other things that I'm going to get back to with the bishop and the Catholic Church that really hurt. But so, it cost us about $2 million in architects, engineering, and legal fees that those people cost us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
And I don't know if you got there, but ultimately, do you get that parcel of land? Do you move on?
Well, what happened was after, 8 or 9 months, I forget what the date was. I was the only one of the founders who went to every meeting. I mean, my heart was pounding out of my chest, but I said, I refuse to not go because there was this one woman in particular who was really, really nasty, and I refused to not show up.
Each town seems to have one of those who loves going to every
But she
single one of those
was a lawyer herself, and she was getting everybody. I mean, they were a pretty well-oiled machine. I think she ran for some office. She got herself into some little office so that she could influence something. I mean, it was a really hard time in my life. And everyone would say, why do you take this so personally? It's like, it's going to be okay. And I'd be like, or they say, what's the worst thing? You go out of business. And I was like, no, we can't. Like, I just felt so much ownership about it. But so we did. Yeah.
Do you know that story with the Manasquan, the basketball and the shot?
Yes.
And they clearly made the shot in time
Yeah.
and lost. You know that thing?
Yes.
So I did a pro bono case on behalf of Manasquan to try to get the New Jersey Sports whatever association to give them the game because they clearly won the game and everyone knew they won the game. So I did that case for Manasquan for those kids on a pro bono basis, and Mark worked on it as well. We worked on it really intensely for like a week or two, pro bono. And I've won a lot of cases and I've lost cases, but we ultimately lost that case and didn't get the kids the game. And that was one of the hardest losses I had to deal with. Like there was just something about it when you put your heart and soul into something and it has nothing to do with money or anything. It's just, So I know.
And did you legally lose it though? Was it legal for them to not rule in their favor?
So you alluded to the boys club that is the shore conference or whatever, and it's the NJSIAA, New Jersey Scholastic
Interscholastic,
which is the NCAA of New Jersey,
which
is essentially a monopoly. This NJSIAA, it's like a monopoly, and what they say goes. Anyway, we fought it in Chancery Court in Ocean County. We went up to the appellate division, and ultimately they said, I forget exactly what they said, but they did not mandate, the court did not require them to look at the video replay to come up with the right result. But yeah, so they lost the game, and I guess Camden won the game, even though they really lost the game.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is, I know what you're saying, like how you put your heart and soul into that, and to have to go to that meeting every time. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So when they actually ruled, and they voted against it, and they illegally denied us the application. So it was illegal because
because it's zoned for it.
It's zoned for it. There was really nothing that should have had them vote that way. But, and I understand business. They felt a lot of pressure and I say they. There were people who voted for us, but they felt a lot of pressure from their constituents, which were their Middletown people. So we knew we were going to appeal. We knew we were going to win. And so we just started the appeal process right away. It was a heartbreak. But during this time, during all the fight in Middletown, we realized that same person who gave us Croydon Hall, who said, you should look at Croydon Hall. I believe it's the same person. He said, you should look at this piece of land on Fort Monmouth. It's not on the main post. It's in the Charles Wood part of the fort, right next to Convault. For Fort Monmouth, there was a child development center. It was called the CDC. It was like a little preschool. And it was, it because we're still there, a building there that was...
Spoiler alert. No.
Yeah. This teeny tiny building, and everything was teeny tiny when you walk in because it was built for little children. So we looked at that, and if anyone knows, if anyone's purchased anything at Fort Monmouth, the application process is so arduous that I think a lot of people just give up. But it's probably like a 50-page packet. You have to talk about job creation and, outdoor space. I mean, I didn't do the package. Our head of school did it. I think with Marie Clifford, they did it together. But so Convault, this big giant building, was one of the first people to build on the Fort Monmouth piece of property.
Netflix is moving in there now too, right?
Yes,
Wow.
yes. But so they had this big building. We wanted to bid on this little dinky 8-acre piece of land with this pretty crappy building on it. And the lawyer for Convault at the time was a partner of John Junko, who was our lawyer with the Middletown application. And I was friends with him because he had a daughter at Rumstead Country Day, as did I. So it's the day it's called the RFOTP. It's an offer to purchase a piece of land. So it's a 50-page document. We have to get it to FEMERA, which, just for those, FEMERA is the Fort Monmouth Economic Revitalization Group, who was dismantling the fort. Sorry if this is really boring, but to get this 50-page packet over by, I think it was 5 p.m. on a certain date. And I'm in the office, I'm signing things because I think I was the chairman of the board at that time, so I'm signing things as fast as I can. And I get a call from this lawyer, who's Convault's lawyer. His name's Mike. He says, Victoria, listen, I hear you're going to bid on that piece of property right next to us, meaning right next to Convault. And he said, Convault wants it. So he goes, don't bid on it. You're going to win in Middletown. He goes, and you're never going to be able to outbid Convault. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I was like, you're right. I'm not going to bid on it. Thank you. So, of course, we had a really good bid on a pretty crappy piece of land. I don't say crappy piece of land, but a crappy building. And we outbid Convault. We got it in. Marie drove it over there. She could still tell you the story. She drove it over there, heart pounding, getting it in on time. And we were awarded that piece of land, 8 acres, small building, which we gutted and redid.
See, that's where the MBA career woman thing came in with that phone call. Hey, let's take a quick break here. Okay, cool. So you guys acquire that building. What road's on Hope Road, right?
It's on Hope Road. The address is actually Corregidor, so we're on the corner of Hope Road and Corregidor.
Cool.
But meanwhile, back at the ranch, even though we're doing all that, trying to acquire that building, we're in our 3rd year at Croydon Hall.
How many
which
students?
We had not meant to be. So for that 3rd year, we could only take 30 girls because we just didn't have the space. Because you said it yourself, it was 30, then it was 65, and then we wanted to take another class. We had to turn a lot of girls away because we could only have 30 girls. And it became a little problematic because 30 girls come into a school where there's 95 girls who've really gelled and become very close because of being those first 2 classes together. Then you have 30 girls, which 30 is not a great number for girls. I mean, the research shows that all girls schools operate best at about 80 a class, 80. So then it was a little bit of that class itself started to break down a little bit. And so we ended up only graduating 23 girls in that class. So that was definitely a make or break year because we had parents constantly worried that we were going to go out of business because they didn't know where we were going. They knew we were losing in Middletown. Then you had kids who were feeling the heat from their parents. We often had to put on meetings and kind of talk parents down, even though they were like, what are you going to do? And I was like, we're going to do it,
Like
even though I didn't know what to do.
management
Yeah.
meetings, like-
And so that class went down to 23. So that was really hard because we had to carry a very small class until they graduated. And it wasn't that great for them either to have such a small class. But anyway, the first class of girls who started out at Croydon Hall, they were able to spend their senior year at the newly renovated Trinity Hall, which was on Fort Monmouth. So we gutted that building, really made everything, once again, state of the arts, really nice labs.
Is that the new building now?
No, that is just the
was the
flat building. That was
pre-existing
pre-existing
building
building. That was an L.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So we we were thrilled to be able to give them that, and we knew how many girls we could house there. And then, from then on, we've had to do building project after building project. We added, so I think that was about 10,000 square feet when we gutted it and made it our own. That was 2016, 2017
And
year.
so that portion of the building still stands?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
The original space was 10,000.
Yes.
Wow. When you were talking about it, you said this little tiny, kids school or something.
Well, it was a preschool. It was like a preschool, but it was like in the shape of an L.
Okay.
When I said tiny, I mean every little toilet was
Yeah,
really
yeah.
tiny, and every little, because I was like, we could use these classrooms, and the teachers were like, we can't use these classrooms. They're built for little kids. So we had to gut it, but we had to put labs in and everything. So it was 10,000 square feet. And then our next building project, so this is building project 3, we added a building, and we attached it, and we added on 20,000 square feet.
Wow.
And I hope I'm getting those numbers exactly right. I'm not great with details, but so that with those 20,000 square feet addition was big enough to house 400 girls. So that was our, the architects, everyone said, this is what you need for 400 girls. And we really didn't even want to have 400 girls. We want to have 80 a class, which is 320. Presently, we have 325 girls. But we built the school for 400 girls. But, that really didn't take into account all the community space and, say, teachers' lounges and maybe a senior lounge. And we don't have a cafeteria. And so we are in our next building project, which is adding on some more community space and some more academic space. So
that third year, you said there were 60-something girls, or you ideally would have had 60-something, but you could only take 30?
We could only take 30.
So is there like a vetting process then?
Yeah, it was a very difficult vetting process, but I don't think I mentioned earlier when we talked about how do you go and recruit girls for school. So even that first year of 30 girls, you said, how did you get those girls? Well, it was challenging because the bishop told every Catholic school that we were not allowed in to talk about ourselves. And he sent a letter to everyone in his database. Remember that database he wouldn't share with us? He sent a letter to everybody in the diocese saying that is not a Catholic school and do not send your daughters there. So really, it was challenging.
Oh my gosh.
So, by the time we only had to take the 30 girls, we really knew what we were doing. It was very sad we could only take the 30, but at this point, you build a reputation little by little each year. You have certain things going for you. And by the time our girls got to the building on Fort Monmouth, I remember sitting in a board meeting saying, okay, so now they're seniors. And, also in one challenging thing, which I didn't mention, was that first 2 classes of students, you had to tell parents, send your daughter to our high school, but we're not accredited. So you can't go to college unless you come from an accredited school. Wow. So we said, we're not accredited. And they said, well, get accredited. And then we say, well, we can't get accredited until you've been in business for 3 years.
Wow.
So,
that's like you need experience to get this job.
Exactly.
You need a job to have experience.
Yeah. So that's why I truly called it these parents who had such buy-in and became such a big part of our community. We call them the founding families because we really wouldn't have been able to do it without them. So by the time those seniors got over that, we were accredited and we had to get them into college. And so in actuality, being a new school and these girls all had these really great stories about, I was in 8th grade and then we decided to go to this brand new school that only had 30 kids, So I think we had a lot of luck.
That might not qualify us to get into any college.
Yeah. So even that first year we got girls into, so my daughter was recruited. She went to UVA, which is an amazing school. We had a girl go to the Naval Academy.
This is
the first year. The first 30 girls. I mean, I can't remember every school. We had a girl get into Johns Hopkins, Villanova, of course. They've always been good to us, and our girls do really well at Villanova.
It's the best one of the ones you mentioned so far.
I know. Should have
Any
said
University
that
of
first.
Delaware?
UVA is a good.
There may have been.
UVA is a good school, but please, Villanova.
No, Villanova is got a very warm warm place in all of our hearts. I mean, they're really good to Trinity Hall, but Trinity Hall girls do really well at Villanova. So that's an interesting thing I learned as someone affiliated with the school, is that if you send a girl to, say, for example, Wake Forest, and she turns out to do really poorly and is a problem, they don't want the next girl from that high school. So we do, thankfully, have really good reputations in all the admissions offices. I mean, a lot of this admission stuff is a crapshoot. I mean, there's no perfect format, no perfect formula that's going to get you into all these great schools. But in that vein, we have gotten girls into Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, almost every Ivy. I'm not sure. I think every Ivy. I don't think we've gotten anyone into Vanderbilt yet, so hoping. But really great schools.
No, actually, you did this year. So I'm pretty sure someone got into Vanderbilt.
Oh, see, that's the thing, is like now I'm a little, I try to stay back a little bit. Now my main goal is fundraising, which has always been the main goal. But
so Jerry's wearing a Trinity Hall athletics shirt now, kind of tongue. But so what happened with the athletics programs, the school as a whole, the curriculum, all that, how to grow?
Well, it just, you added those first years, we didn't have a field hockey program because none of those girls wanted to play field hockey. So you have a couple sports in the fall, a couple in the winter, and a couple in the spring. So if the girls wanted lacrosse, we'd field a lacrosse team, a pretty small lacrosse team. So we had to choose our sports that way initially. But now, in my mind, looking at the budget, sometimes I think we have too many sports. I mean, we have sailing, we have gymnastics, we have every sport and then some, ice hockey. And one thing that I try to tell parents is that when girls are happy, so of course we want our kids to be happy, and I didn't even say this, but I really wanted my girls to go there because I loved my experience at an all-girls school. I was so happy in high school. And some of the reasons being it was an all-girls school. We never shaved our legs. We didn't do our hair. We didn't put on makeup. We were so silly and goofy. And it was also really cool to be smart. I mean, it was almost like the people who weren't smart or didn't try hard, you didn't really have respect for them. And I wanted that for my daughters. So my daughters would grow up and I would always say, don't dumb it down for the boys. That was like my phrase, don't dumb it down for the boys, because
I like that.
The research shows that in a regular, public school or any co-ed classroom, boys are louder, they take up more space, and often they take all the leadership positions, and oftentimes girls don't want to seem smarter than their boy counterparts, so they act a little dumber than they are. They're not the first to raise their hand. I mean, I hope that's changing, but that has been the research. And so what we see at Trinity Hall is much like what I remember at my high school, is that girls are silly and they're happy, and they're not going to be happy every day, which the original head of school said to me. I said, I just want the girls to be happy. She said, they'll be happy, but they can't be happy every day because they won't grow. And you can only grow when you're uncomfortable. You have to be a little uncomfortable. But when girls are happy, they do well academically and they do well athletically because they're happy. So we find that you could have the best coach on earth. If you have a whole bunch of unhappy girls, you're probably not going to do that well. When you have girls who strive really high academics, they tend to strive really high athletically as well. So when they hold themselves to high standards, it's not just in academics. So we have been able to get the sports. You'll have up years, down years for certain sports. You graduate a senior who gets recruited by Princeton. I mean, you have to replace those girls. But we won the ShopRite Cup twice, which is, I don't know if people know what that is, but it's an award given by ShopRite. But it's not only about how well you do in sports. It's about sportsmanship, not breaking any rules, not kind of cutting any corners. So I'm really proud of what we've done academically and athletically, and in the arts too. I mean, none of my children are thespians, but I do believe we have some really great drama and art programs. So
we had the last guest we had before you was a Trinity Hall graduate, Lucy, and I think I screwed up her last name, but it's a Rederer?
Rederer, yes.
Okay. And
yes.
I was shocked. We started out, I was like, okay, your LinkedIn bio has you. She's like plays flute,
yes.
I think actually piccolo now in the USC marching band. She's a long distance runner. She works as like a NASA ambassador studying astrophysics. I was like, what? How do you have time in your day? But was unbelievably well-rounded individual.
Yeah. And she's a really great example of a kid who goes to college and takes advantage of everything college has to offer, which, being a swimmer in college, I didn't have the ability to do that. But it's so sad sometimes when I look at people and I'm like, a little less drinking, a little more, join a club, do this, you know what I mean? But Lucy is certainly taking advantage of everything USC has to offer. She's really fun to watch in the marching band.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was like unfazed about it. I was like, so you just walk out in front of 80, 90,000 people? And she's like, oh yeah, they crashed like, my welcome thing for the school. And I was like, the marching band looks cool. I'm going to do that. And I was
Yeah. They're a big part of the football games.
That's awesome.
So.
You talked about, and I don't want to like start hijacking or steering it and stuff, but you talked about
Mark,
something.
hijack all you want.
All right. It always happens where before we start these things, we talk about something in Jerry's office and we're like, oh, let's just go. Let's just do it. You were talking about a speech you gave, an 8th grade graduation, kind of, I don't know if you want to get into that, kind of about how like, you'll have good days, but not every day is going to be a good day. Like life's not always easy, but it's important that you kind of get those lumps in and learn from them.
Yeah. I mean, I was asked to be the keynote speaker for my son's 8th grade graduation at Rumson Country Day. And so he was the final child. I was graduating from there. So I think I probably broke a record in terms of tuition paid and donations given. But I think the reason they asked me to be the keynote speaker was because of my role at Trinity Hall. So, it speaks to education and valuing education. But when you're asked to be a speaker for anything, but especially for younger children. And I always believe if you're going to be a speaker at a graduation, you should speak to the students. It's really not to the audience, in my opinion. And so...
Not to the parents, you mean?
You can talk to the parents, but you have these kids sitting on stage.
Yeah.
And my goal was to have them walk away with something that they remembered.
Yeah.
And so, we didn't really get into my personal life in terms of I've had a lot of turmoil in my life. For a lot of different reasons, but I decided I was just going to be really, really open about my challenges that have happened to me in my life. And one thing that came to me was that, we've been very fortunate, my husband and me and our children. We live in a very big house in Rumson, mostly because I really, really love old houses, but we are fortunate to have a lot of resources. I think we really try to give back to the community. But I think when you look in on someone, say, for example, who lives in a house like mine, you say, they just don't maybe have any trouble. They don't have anything going wrong. I think when you have money troubles, it's so invasive and pervasive in your life that you think that having money would, and I say this from growing up with having money challenges, that you think, anyone who has a lot of money, then they're good, like life's great. But each year you grow as an adult, you realize that that is actually not the truth. And so I wanted to dismiss that a little bit because here I am, I'm up there, I started a school, I'm the keynote speaker, blah, blah, blah. So I really wanted to say something that was meaningful, and there are things people didn't know about me. I mean, in 2002, my husband and I lost our son. Our 18-month-old son died suddenly. We had a 3-year-old who was our oldest, and then we had a 4-week-old and an 18-month-old, and he died very suddenly of he got a heart arrhythmia. And talk about the rug being pulled out from under you. So a lot of people didn't know that about me. And then, I had some significant mental health challenges in high school and college. And I had to leave Dartmouth for a semester and kind of get myself together and go back. And what I wanted to tell people was that things, I think people looking in, even when I was in college, like, oh my gosh, she has everything. She's at Dartmouth and she's this and she's that. And then it was like, oh no, she's home this semester, in a psych unit because she's really struggling with depression. So, and it was a little heavy in terms of my speech, but not heavy where kids hadn't heard this stuff before. I just wanted to be a human being in front of them to say, listen, if you think, and there was someone in particular at that graduation, really going through something really terrible. And I felt like I owed it to him to not make this speech about, hey, life's great. Because life can be great, and it is oftentimes.
He had just lost his father.
He had just lost his father.
Yeah.
And I felt it was important that my speech be about that. I wanted everyone to know, not just him, that if you could really be struggling, and if you look across the cafeteria and you look at people and you think, they have everything, I have nothing. That's generally not the case. So I guess my story wasn't just life is hard, but my story was like, share your story, because I think by me sharing my story, it makes me a lot more human to people. I mean, it's having had lost a child, it's kind of incredible the amount of people who either I don't know or I don't know well enough, but they come up to me and they open up to me and they just tell me everything, because I don't think there's a lot of people out there that they think would get it. So I won't get everything, but when you get losing a child, you're pretty open to understanding other people's pain or hardship or challenge. And, you know, you hear some crazy stuff, but I think what I was trying to do and encourage kids to share their challenges or share their, stories, because it may not be hard for you right this minute, but it's going to be hard later, and you might remember what a conversation, or vice versa, So that was my speech.
I think that's I think that's awesome. I really do, because you're right. Everybody thinks like, man, he's got it all. This person has no problem, and it's like you said. Look around the room. We even say here, like, you never know. Everyone's got something. Everyone has something going on. Nobody's life is perfect, and yeah, I think that's really powerful to say that, especially too at 8th grade when everyone's going into high school and kind of into that, like, I don't know. I'm old school enough that like now they're going into the social media age too, where everybody's going to be on their TikTok and Instagram and everyone's life looks amazing. It's like, that's not the reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, social media makes that stuff so much worse. It's so dumb.
Well, I did get their attention at the beginning, because I said, how am I going to get their attention? Because I did want them to listen.
You did a TikTok dance?
So I said, I can't even get my son to listen to me. So I said, so instead of doing a speech, I did a TikTok. And then they were all like, so then I said, no, I'm kidding. But I thought my kids were like, don't do that. I said, I'm going to do it because I'll get their attention. But
that's funny.
So let's kind of try to end this on like a high note. That was a really powerful story. Thanks for, I don't want to be a cliche, but thanks for sharing that.
No, but seriously,
thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
But, so honestly, the last podcast I did, some of the criticisms I got is that I didn't shut up enough and I talked too long. So I've been trying to work on that, but now I'm going to talk a little bit. I think the reason I asked you to come on is because I think that story you've told today is like fascinating. I didn't, how it started out with 30 girls in a rickety building to what it is today. And, my daughter goes to Trinity Hall. She's a senior now, and the school's amazing. I went to Christian Brothers Academy, which was the all-boys school in the area, and that was cool, and there was like a lot there. But I've always viewed Trinity Hall kind of like, my impression of it is that it's like torn down, the traditional idea of a school and rebuilt it. I went to Catholic school my whole life too, including through law school. And, there's so much rigidity to it and that kind of thing. And then with the public schools, there's the state mandates and the curriculum and all the things. And I feel like Trinity, just my opinion, kind of tore down our notion of a school and rebuilt it to today's standards and what people are looking for today. And frankly, like, I have no idea, like my daughter's, she's doing like these engineering projects, I haven't been able to help her with math really since 8th grade. So I can't, I didn't get past like algebra, I guess it is. I mean, she's taking like these AP classes and all these girls are, and the schools these girls are getting into is unbelievable. The culture there is, the culture is success. And I think the whole women's empowerment thing is cool. She's always talking about women's empowerment. And it's funny because we'll be at like we'll be talking and she'll be like, well, why aren't there women there? Or why is the women thing? And I just like, I think it's kind of cool, but it's really, in my view, it's an awesome school. And
thank you.
And that story is just fascinating to what you talked about there. to what it's become today and what it is like, just so people know too, like, what are those lockers made out of? They don't look like fake wood. Like, what is that?
No, they're real wood.
Like, what kind of wood? It looked like cherry or
I
something.
don't know,
Mahogany
it
or
probably are
something?
cherry or
Yeah, it's like
something.
mahogany.
Mairead would be able to answer that.
Wow.
No, it's beautiful. Like, you go in, it's like a really like that you'd see in a fine hotel, and the carpet and the trim and everything's great. And then they have these like state-of-the-art science labs. You talk about the swim team.
Yeah.
Their swim coach is Brian Rederer, Lucy's
Oh,
father.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's got like national records, Olympic trials,
Well,
and
he's one of the most decorated NC2 athletes of all time,
yeah,
Brian Rederer.
And
And he's our
that's-
swim coach.
that's the
Wow.
Trinity Hall swim coach.
Yeah.
And he's, in my opinion, too, he's awesome because kids today with sports, it's like D1 sports, it's crazy and all the injuries. And I think he's got an awesome balance between making it fun, making it competitive, and being fair with who swims and who doesn't. And it's not like an overly stressful kind of experience, the swim team. And I think it's awesome. It's really cool.
And it's kind of,
Thank you.
your story too. It's all about the perseverance and what you did
Yeah.
and making it happen. And, everyone kind of likes to, hopefully, try and make a difference in the world. And oh my gosh, to year after year have graduating classes that are impacted because of the work that you did and the group did originally to get the school going really is fascinating.
Thank you.
It's
thank
awesome.
It's fascinating too, just when you told your story about growing up and about how your dad valued education, and it seems like that's kind of carried through too. Not only you going to 2 Ivy League schools and everything, but then instilling that and giving back to the community in that educational way. What's it like when you kind of reflect back on where you've been and in life so far, and kind of seeing that school, and you're like, how does it make you feel? You know what I mean?
I think maybe last year I might have said, I finally appreciate it a little bit, because there were times where it was so challenging and all that Middletown stuff, or so much ugly stuff, or just parent after parent calling and complaining about something. And I felt like I had to answer everybody. I had to make everybody happy. And so many times I wanted to quit. And my husband was, first of all, he was like, stop answering the phone. But I was like, these people took a risk. Like, I have to answer their questions. They have to know I care. But there were, we would scream and fight, mostly me screaming, but about, and then at one time, like, I quit to my husband. And he truly turned to me and he said, you can quit, but I'm going to finish it because the girls in Monmouth County deserve it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I was like, I can't quit. All right, well, but I just think so much of it was like so hard. And it was really hard on my kids because it was a lot of time away from my kids. And my oldest said, I thought you and Dad were going to get divorced during that time, which makes me so sad. But now I really look back and think I should have tried to take more joy in the joyful things that were happening, like go to the plays, go to more swim meets, I always went to every swim meet, don't get me wrong, but go to things of like the celebratory things that were happening, because I think I focused so much on how hard all of the things, like the fundraising and the applications for land and all the things that needed to be done, as opposed to trying to really enjoy the successes that they were having all along. So I really do feel like, looking back now, I feel very happy. It's done. It's doing well, and it's really a well-oiled machine. I mean, they don't need me. They're doing their own thing. We have a great new head of school, Teresa Kiernan. She's amazing. She's been with us since day one, and she has a great team behind her. The biggest thing is we're working on our construction project, which will be our final academic construction project. We are waiting.
Hey, real quick before we get to that, it's competitive to get into, right? The girls have to apply, and not everyone gets accepted.
Oh yeah, it's very competitive. Even that first year when we really needed students, we had to deny some girls because it's a pretty rigorous program. It's not rigorous to the point where you can't do it. You just have to be committed to it. Your parents have to be committed to it, and you have to want to go there.
I've heard, though, that because of the rigorous program, a lot of kids find college actually easy and a lot more fun, and they're more successful in college because of the training and the rigorous stuff at Trinity Hall.
Yeah, and I have heard that myself, and what's funny is that it's a rigorous program that you have to be able to do. So you have to take a test to get in. Your GPA from your grammar school has to be good, and you have to have really good letters of recommendation. And it's looked very holistically. But that doesn't mean if you really, really want to be there and you're really, really willing to do the work and you have great recommendations, and maybe you didn't do that great on the entrance exam, but if you really belong at Trinity Hall, you will get in. I wouldn't ever want anyone to think it's so hard I can't get in, I can't do the work, because the one thing is that getting the work done, there's so much support. You've probably seen this with Anna, is if even my daughter, who is at a great school right now, who graduated top of her class, she would stay every day for whatever, support, extra help. And I say, why are you McLean, are you having trouble? And she's like, no, I just really even want to understand it better. And then she said, and sometimes other girls need help, which is great. So I think the support is there. Once a girl becomes part of our community, we're going to drag her through. But they really learn a lot in an environment where engineering, for example, they have so much fun in engineering. We have so many girls go on to do engineering. I think most people find our engineering teacher like one of their most beloved teachers, Callie Lambrew. She's amazing.
I found too that kids are moving into the area, or families are moving into the area because there's now an option for an all-girls school.
Wow.
Like they're moving from up north down to Monmouth County, whereas as otherwise they wouldn't. And I think that speaks to Trinity having made the pie bigger as opposed to taking from other schools. And as far as I understand, the other Catholic schools, high schools in the area are still doing well. St. Rose and RBC, for example,
Yeah.
Red Bank Catholic.
Yeah. I mean, what's the saying? Add more ships to the ocean, you raise the level
All
of the
ships
water.
rise with the tide.
All ships rise with the tide. I know, I'm
Yeah.
making it so long.
No.
All ships rise with the tide.
That must be a Catholic school thing.
Educators really want kids to do well, and you want to be at the right place for you. And it isn't always the right place for every girl, but it is the right place for most girls. Most girls will do better in an all-girls environment. That's a fact. Some girls may not want to be there. I always say to the parents who tell me that their friends want her to go somewhere else, I say, well, she's 13. Let her decide college.
Yeah.
I say parents should make the decision on high school, but, to each his own or her own. But yeah, I think we're doing so many things well, and I think we're allowed to do that, or we were allowed to do that because it was a blank slate. You hire teachers who want to be there and want to be, and I think they all take ownership.
So what do you what's the school have going on now? What kind of projects does it have, and how can people contribute, apply to the school or help, because regardless of if you send a daughter or family member to the school or not, the school helping helps the community, helps, the school thriving helps Monmouth County, it helps New Jersey and frankly our nation. So what kind of stuff do you have going on now, and how can people contribute to it?
Well, right now we have a two-prong construction project going on. We're adding to one side of the building because we need more community space, because we have so many girls. We want to make sure that if we have an event, we want their parents to be able to be there as well and all fit in one area. So that's our community space expansion. And then we've expanded the academic portion because we want more labs. We need a few more classrooms, and we need spaces to support our teachers, because our teachers work really hard and they deserve to have some downtime and, some maker spaces, things like that. So we're doing, we're in education, you really have to stay on top of things. You can't just rely on, the past, right? Rest on your laurels. You can't do that. So we have those two big projects going on. So we are really in the middle of a $16 million capital campaign, of which we've only raised, we're close to $8 million right now. So obviously, if you have a couple $1 million sitting around, I would really love for you to send it our way. But I just want to point out a few things. Every dollar donated to Trinity Hall goes so much further than anywhere else, because we don't have an endowment. We still have a gap between what we charge in tuition and what it costs us to educate a girl. So every dollar goes towards programming, goes towards the girls. And our tuition is not based on this big new construction project we're building. Our tuition needs to cover our operations, which it doesn't yet. So we still have to raise money every year to cover our operations. But we do need the money to finish this building. I mean, we are going to finish. I think that's one thing that is a little bit of a trouble for Trinity Hall is that we always build before we have the money because we're always like, the girls deserve it.
Because
it's now or
why
never.
wait?
Well, we can't wait. Like, we could never wait it. We were always rushing.
Like
So-
Apollo said, there is no tomorrow. So.
That's right. So I don't know if I answered your question. I mean,
did.
obviously, if you went onto trinityhallnj.org, you could find a link to give. I'm very happy to give anybody a tour of the school or a tour of the construction project or answer any questions. Thank you for having me on your show.
I saw one of the things I said I got to get her on is when I saw you on a video with a hard hat on and on a forklift on the job site. Like, that was pretty cool.
It's funny.
Yeah, you
But-
could find that there too.
But awesome. Victoria, thank you to you. Thank you to your husband, Justin. And thank you to Mairead
And Sean
Clifford, for what they did for the community and for everything. So thanks.
Thank
It's
you.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Mark.
Big time. Thank you. And thanks for all you do, the donations and everything. You glossed over that, but you're very giving.
Thank you.